Welcome, this is Najma Minhas and Dr. Moeed Pirzada with Global Village Space. We're continuing with our discussion on the Ukraine and the Russia. On our last discussion where we finished was that we thought that Russia would probably maybe invade Donbass and the war would remain to that region alone. Yet we've seen that it's actually spread a lot further.
Yes, that's true. You're true that, I personally misjudged looking at the news. I thought that Putin is saying maybe Putin is giving an exaggerated threat, but the Russian military will restrict itself to occupying the Donbass region and then will wait for the Ukrainians. And I thought that Ukraine being such a small military would also not be able to mount the kind of resistance. But two things have happened since then. One is this, that the Russian military in its strategy has decided to paralyze, demobilize, and reduce the capabilities of the Ukrainian military to respond. And they have done it by striking at least 180 sites across Ukraine. They're mostly aerodromes, airfields, and radar facilities. They haven't attacked on the urban centers and things. And the second thing, which is totally surprising for me at least, is that Putin is very clear that he has to do a regime change in Ukraine. And this is what that is why the attack that has taken place in the north on the capital city of Kyiv, where now Russians have surrounded the Kyiv city, the capital city. And it's only a matter of time. I think it's difficult to make projections because this war can be very messy, but it looks like the Kyiv will not be able to stand for very long. Especially if
they're fighting against the world's probably fourth largest army in arms, right? So the Russians have over 1 million men in arms.
Russians probably have about 1.3 million active military, but that underestimates their power. I think after United States, if there's one military that have such kind of fighting capability, Chinese do not have that kind of fighting capability. Indians are, of course, much inferior from that point of view, and no one else in Europe has that fighting capability.
So given that, what do you think the strategy is for Ukraine?
They first of all look the kind of attack they have mounted. They have attacked Ukraine from all sides. They have attacked Ukraine from air, they have attacked Ukraine from sea, they have attacked Ukraine from land, from at least three different directions. They came from Crimea, Sevastopol side. They have also fired from the naval side. They came from the north, they came from the east. They came from everywhere, on Ukraine. And they have also demonstrated to United States and to the world and to the Europeans, to everyone, to Germans, to French, to British, that what kind of, military capability they have and how they have further expanded and strengthened and improved their military capability in the last 10 years. This much they have actually shown.
Didn't the Ukrainians have an agreement with the Turks with regard to the Black Sea?
I think, it's a situation is a little confusing because Turkey probably had defense agreements with Russia and some sort of defense arrangement with Russia and also with Ukraine. So Ukraine expected Turkey, and they demanded from Turkey actually that Turkey should block the Bosphorus passageway and should not allow the Russian warships to enter Bosphorus into toward the Black Sea or the Baltic. But while Turkey has raised a lot of rhetoric and noise against Russia on the Ukrainian invasion, they haven't really blocked the passageway. And I think they were not in a situation to block the passageway because Russians would have taken very unkindly toward that gesture. But
although the Turks and the Turkish president did make a very strong statement initially.
Yes, Turkey is notable while India remains silent, Pakistan remains silent, Iran voiced in favor of Iran and China and have raised voices in favor of Russia. Turkey was notable as an exception that basically raised his voice against Russia. And this despite the fact that President Erdogan had spoken more than once with President Putin on the issue. But I wanted to come back on, one thing. On Friday, because Russia started their attack on Thursday, which is 24th, after the Putin's second speech. One speech was on 21st and the second is on 24th. And then they started attack on Thursday. On 25th, which is Friday, Ukrainian president sent a message, which is reported all over the world media, and Russians responded to that. And they said, we want to negotiate, we want to talk to you. And they suggested that we can have these talks in Minsk, which is the capital of Belarus. Then they suggested that maybe we should have talks in Warsaw, which is the capital of Poland, and Poland is a NATO member, right? And then they disappeared. So Russians have noted this thing, that they wanted, and the Russians immediately said that we are prepared to send a military and foreign policy, foreign affairs delegation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs delegations and defense delegation to Minsk. And then they disappeared. But at the time, if you look at the foreign policy in American media, they said that Russians also wanted them to surrender because they want demilitarization. So two stated goals of Russia for Ukraine are that they want a regime change, and they want them, they're prepared to talk, but they also say that we have to demilitarize this pro-Nazi and fascist regime. Now, this is there's no real evidence of the Ukrainian regime being pro-Nazi, but Russians are continuously saying that they are Nazis, neo-Nazis.
The president himself is Jewish.
Yeah, the president himself is Jewish, and of course,
the Ukrainian president.
How could they be?
Also, Putin's speech referred to the genocide of millions happening in Ukraine. I mean, there's no evidence of that, and it's not clear why he's referring.
The total population of the Donbass region is slightly more than 4 million, out of which approximately 40% of the population is of Russian ethnicity. More than so almost like close to 60% or 55 to 56% population is Ukrainian, in ethnic is non-Russian, and there's no serious evidence. So there's no evidence whatsoever of any massacre being planned by Ukraine in the Donbass region.
Do you think Putin has any red lines with respect to what he intends to do in Ukraine?
I think they could have easily gone into Kyiv by now, but they are they're holding themselves. First of all, it was actually quite spectacular how quickly they were able to reach Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. I mean, despite the fact that after all, Ukraine is a country, and Ukraine has been armed to teeth, as the Russians allege, in the last 8 years by the Americans. But Russians were very quickly able to reach the Kyiv. But I think they're not entering the Kyiv because of the international repercussions, because Kyiv is a city of 3 million. It's in Europe, a city of 3 million is a large city. It's the 7th largest city in Europe. And the Ukrainian government has distributed 18 to 20,000 submachine guns to militias, and they have trained militias over there. They have also been waiting for this day. Russia has been planning for this day. Ukraine has been planning for this day. So if the Russian military has to enter Kyiv to clear the militias, if the Ukrainian military does not surrender, if the Ukrainian president holds on, it can be quite a serious loss of life in terms of casualties and fatalities. And Russia at this time, when it faces all kinds of sanctions, it would not like to see the images of hundreds or thousands of people injured or dead in the streets of Kyiv. So Russians have to be very careful. If you look, all the strikes which they have done are purely surgical strikes against the military targets so far.
But they attacked some, I think, tower, right?
No, it's very ambiguous. It's not very clear. The Ukrainians and the Americans have claimed that they attacked on Saturday morning a high-rise building. But if you look more carefully, the high-rise building has been attacked by a stray lost kind of by a rocket. And this building is not very far from the Kyiv International Airport. Russians are attacking the airport, right? So it's either a stray Russian rocket, which is highly unlikely, or it's one of the rocket that was fired by the Kyiv air defense and is lost away and has hit the building.
So if you think that Putin's strategy is he wants a regime change, then what is the US's counter strategy?
Before I come to the US's counter strategy, let me read something out, because you pointed out that how we had a misjudgment on a few days ago when we basically were talking on Ukraine. At that time, we had only read about the Putin's speech, which he did on 24th and on 21st and then 24th. But I had not read his speech line by line, which was actually a mistake. Since then, I have read more than once his speech line by line, and I have the whole transcript in my hand. And I would like my producer to show this on the screen. You see, on the first page, it says that basically he's talking about how we are losing patience with the United States and with the West. And he says, I'm reading from him, quote, "It is well known that for past 30 years, we have persistently and patiently tried to reach an agreement with the leading NATO countries on the principles of equal and indivisible security in Europe. In response to our proposals, we constantly faced either cynical deception and lies or attempts to pressure and blackmail, while the North Atlantic Alliance, in the meantime, despite all the protests and concerns, is steadily expanding. The military machine is moving, and I repeat, is coming close to our borders. Now, throughout this transcript, throughout this speech on 24th, and on his speech on 21st, and all other speeches which he has done in the past several months, he's continuously protesting on the expansion of the NATO. At this moment, there are 5 NATO members that share borders with Russia, right? They are, I think, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, I think 2 of them, then Poland, then Hungary, then Norway. And at least 3 or 4 of these countries now NATO countries share borders with Ukraine as well, which becomes important in terms of American counter strategy. I think Poland, Hungary, Romania, they all share borders, and Moldova has a very close, sort of relationship with the United States. So then he raises the question that why is all this happening to Russia, to us? And he says the answer is clear. Everything is clear and obvious. The Soviet Union in the late 80s of the last century weakened and then completely collapsed. The whole course of events that took shape then is a good lesson for us today as well. It convincingly showed that the paralysis of power and will is the first step towards complete degradation and oblivion. As soon as we lost confidence in ourselves for some time, and that's it, the balance of power in the world turned out to be disturbed. That has led to the fact that the previous treaties and agreements, this is a very interesting line, but before that I want to basically say something. You see, his speech almost reads like a very good written analysis or op-ed. It's a very well prepared speech. It resonates, well, it doesn't resonate within the United States or Europe, but it resonates very well with all the third world and developing world, whether you're in India or in Pakistan, you're in Middle East or Africa or you're in China. What he says, what Putin says in a speech resonates with all the people, because we all know what really happened with United States hyperpower and unipower, and how the United States has rudely and arrogantly treated Middle East, the Muslim world, and everyone, and China across the world. Then he says, this has led to the fact that the previous treaties and agreements are no longer in effect. Persuasions and requests do not help. Everything that doesn't suit the hegemon, that is United States, those in power, is declared archaic, obsolete, and unnecessary. Now, what is he actually referring to? He's actually referring to the fact that Soviet Union, USSR, after the Second World War, had entered into several treaties and agreements and arrangements of power sharing in the Europe. He says once the Soviet Union collapsed, the United States and the NATO have started behaving in a way that all the arrangements and the agreements with the USSR or the Soviet Union do not hold, because Soviet Union doesn't exist. Russia claims to be a continuing power. It doesn't say that we are an inheritor of Soviet Union. This is why they have the seat in the Security Council. Now, there is a very interesting request by the Ukraine to the world body and United Nations that Russia's seat to the Security Council should be cancelled because of the collapse and ending of the USSR. The Ukrainian argument at this time is that Russia is not the same state. Russia's argument is that we are the same state, we are actually a continuing power. If you accept this thing that Russia is not a continuing power, but is a successor state to the USSR, then Russia will lose its right to the United Nations Security Council. So will China, because China also got the seat in 1971 when Nixon recognized the seat of power in China to be Beijing rather than
Taipei.
Rather than the Taipei and the Taiwan. So it's an interesting legalistic constitutional question that has been raised, and this is what Russia is also raising. Now, what resonates with the world, with the Muslim world, with Middle East, with India, with Africa, with China, is when he looks at the events that have happened in the last 20 years. He says, first, without any sanction from the UN Security Council, they carried out a bloody military operation against Belgrade, the former Yugoslavia, using aircraft and missile right in the very center of Europe. Then after a few lines, he says, then came the turn of Iraq, Libya, Syria. The illegitimate use of military force against Libya, the perversion of all decisions of the UN Security Council on the Libyan issue, led to the complete destruction of the state, to the emergence of a huge hotbed of international terrorism, to the fact that the country plunged into humanitarian catastrophe that has not stopped for many years, civil war. Then he also points out to a massive migration exodus from North Africa and Middle East to Europe. This also resonates with Europe as to what happened in Libya. Then he talks of that how a similar fate was prepared for Syria the fighting of the Western coalition. So he keeps on mentioning all the events. He keeps on mentioning.
So do you think this is part of his strategy, that he wants to appeal out to the broader world to justify what he's doing?
Definitely. I mean, it is part of his strategy. I heard a Pakistani leading ex-diplomat in a briefing that basically said that the two statesmen in the world who are very clever, very sharp, and one is Putin and the other is Xi. So one is, of course, a very clever strategy. He wants to resonate with the Russian people because there is an election in 2024. He has amended the Russian constitution in a way that he can now continue as a president or prime minister till
36,
36, right? And he came into power in 1998. So this is, of course, a political strategy. He also wants to resonate to people in East Europe, in Caucasus, in Central Asia, in people in China. He wants to resonate to people in Africa, to the whole world, to the people in Europe. So it's a clever strategy. But also, I think that apart from the clever strategy and sharpness and the fact that he's very wily, he's also very desperate. I mean, if you look at his whole speech carefully, he's actually very desperate. He actually believes that, United States through NATO, he points out to the fact that in 1949, NATO only had 12 members. And now NATO has 30 members and 5 of them share borders with Russia. So he also sounds afraid. He's also fearful. He's also desperate. He's insecure. And his actions against Ukraine basically reflect a sort of Russian insecurity and desperation, that he thinks that I have the power right now and I must act before it's too late.
Okay, so then if we go back to the question, what is the US counter strategy given what's on the ground?
There is a very interesting paper foreign policy article by an ex-CIA operational guy. His name is Coming. The article's subject title is Coming Ukrainian Insurgency. The author is Douglas London, who worked for more than 30 years as an operational person in CIA, and he's author of a few books as well. He points out that United States has been preparing for this Ukrainian invasion by Russia for at least the past 8 years. Ukrainians have also been preparing for it since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and took away the port city of the Sevastopol. He says Russia has also been preparing for this day. So both sides have been preparing for this day, right? So United States' first bet is for somehow or the other the Ukrainian government of President Zelensky to survive, which is holding on for the past 3 days now. If the government survives, but Russia also understands that if the government survives, it will start to get a lot of overt public help from United States and from Europe and from the NATO, basically from United States. And few hours ago, on Saturday morning, President Biden announced a $600 million aid package for Ukraine, out of which expressly $350 million is military aid. Now, this military aid can flow, according to Douglas London, the CIA author, to Ukraine if a government holds. Russia also knows this. If a government holds, aid can come. So Russia's target and strategy is that the government should not hold. Either they should capitulate, surrender, or the President Zelensky is made to abdicate, or he should be made dysfunctional. So Russia can actually bring a government of its own choice. They can implant and impose a government. That will bring the United States to the second phase of strategy. If you look at the map, and we must show the map on the screen, Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe after Russia itself in terms of the territory. Its territorial mass is more than 600,000 square kilometers. If you see that Pakistan is slightly more than 900,000 square kilometers, including Azad Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan. So you can very well imagine that how large Ukraine is. If it is the second largest country in terms of area in Europe, then it is large, it's more large, it's bigger than Germany and France, individually. So if United States has to support a Ukrainian insurgency across a Russian-imposed system of government, then United States has huge opportunity of pumping in small weapons, arms, strategic advice. And according to Douglas London, the CIA author in Foreign Affairs, in the article, the Coming Ukrainian Insurgency, CIA specializes in creating insurgencies and sustaining them. It says that CIA's precursor, which was probably another office, or which is called in 1945-46, was basically, it started by creating an entity or an organization that could spark insurgencies against the Germans across to Europe. So they were actually supporting the French insurgency or French, resistance movement against the Nazi Germany, right? And ever since, CIA has specialized in running the covert operations. I mean, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Middle East, whether it's somewhere else, right? So they were waiting for this day. From that point of view, Putin has taken a very difficult decision. He's placed himself at the mercy of CIA. Now we know that Putin is also a very sharp man. He understands. So there are two very intelligent entities, United States Intelligence Agency and Putin and his military machine. They both understand what they're doing. And Americans, if President Zelensky surrenders or abdicates, then you will see the beginning of a very painful, difficult insurgency supported by United States that can run on and on, along with the massive sanctions.
And the aim being to wear down Russia, basically.
Now, yes, of course, the aim has to exhaust Russia, to wear down Russia, to demonize Russia, to demonize Putin, to try to spread the insurgencies to other parts of the Russian Republic, because after all, Ukraine borders Russia. Already, if you look at the screens of CNN and BBC, they are showing that people in Russia are demonstrating against Putin's action to attack Ukraine, because Ukraine, in many ways, is to Russia as Afghanistan is to Pakistan, or if you give a more very difficult example, then as if Azad Kashmir is to Pakistan, in the sense something which is very closely integrated with Pakistani Punjab, right, and with Islamabad or with KP, right, the territory. So Russians operating in Ukraine can be at least very unpopular to a sizable segment of the Russian population. So we are looking towards a huge battle of sorts beginning over there. And don't forget the impact of the sanctions. Yes, Putin must have been prepared for the impact of the sanctions. But the sanctions which have been outlined in the past 3 days are massive. If they really implement these sanctions, I mean, I say really implement, because if they really implement the sanctions, they will have impact on US economy and also on the European economy.
They were even discussing initially the SWIFT wasn't going to Russia, but now there's increasing talk that the European nations are agreeing that maybe Russia should be expelled from SWIFT.
Which will be a very big decision, actually, very difficult decision, because their payments have to be payments by the UK and the European firms and companies, which have to be obtained from the Russian firms and companies, and they can be only obtained through SWIFT.
So I want to now come to the role of China and India in this. China recently, Putin went to China and they signed a joint statement which included statements such as there's no limits to the kind of relationship the two countries have. So China obviously recently on the, I think it was yesterday, on the vote that was held at the United Nations Security Council, abstained, which was expected, to be honest. But the interesting question arises over India's role, who also abstained yesterday. What do you think is happening there? India has generally stayed very quiet on the issue and definitely abstained yesterday. A reporter even asked President Biden, is India on board? Yes. And President Biden evaded the question.
No, he said he's going to talk to Prime Minister Modi about it. I think he said something like this. But see, India had no real option. This is a very difficult diplomatic moment for India. It has signed more than almost 60 agreements, various kind of contractual things, defense pacts, which are part of the multi-dimensional strategic relationship with the United States. But when the crunch time came with Russia, and it has drifted away from the Russian alliance, Russia is no more such a close ally as it used to be in 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s on till that time. But at the same time, India cannot annoy Russia. It wants to keep Russia on its side, because if it allows Russia to totally drift away from it, and Russians are looking at how the Indians are going to behave, then there would be a very clear, visible arc against it. That is Russia, China, and in between is Pakistan. And Pakistan has already made the move of engaging Moscow and improved relationship for the past 15 years. So New Delhi is very keenly looking at the developments. So it has wisely stayed away from the vote. Of course, and China on the, so it varies place, but some people were telling me that Americans are also now looking at India, and they have seen India wavering in the present situation, because the present situation is unlike any other situation which United States has faced vis-a-vis Russia or India's commitment in the past several years, right? Now, at this moment, if you look at the CNN and the BBC, they're only talking of China, making noise in favor of Russia, or China not voting or abstaining from the UN Security Council. They're not mentioning India as many times as they mention China. But yet I have heard analysts on CNN and on BBC that have pointed out that India has not really stood up with the United States and the West on the issue. So it's a difficult moment for Indian Foreign Office and Indian government.
We can discuss what implications this would have for Quad on another show. But I mean, let's talk about the implications of what's happening for this in Russia and Ukraine for the world, and Pakistan in particular.
You see, for Pakistan, most of the attention has remained focused that why the Prime Minister Imran Khan has actually gone to Moscow at the time when President Putin had made it obvious that he's going to attack Ukraine after his speech on 21st February. And while the Prime Minister was there on 23rd, on 24th morning, he made the second speech and he actually attacked Ukraine from 3 directions. So the attention and the intellectual space has remained focused on the negative optics. And what has been discussed much less are the economic implications for Pakistani state and the Pakistani state at this moment, in the fact that the oil prices have crossed $105 the Brent per barrel, and the gas price. So Pakistan is a net importer of both the oil, the furnace oil, the petroleum products, and also of the gas. Now, gas prices are linked, as we know, with the oil prices. And Pakistan is using both the oil and the gas for electricity production. So it's a huge nightmare. That means the government, and I think the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, was scheduled to speak. I think the speech hasn't happened so far, but he's expected to make a nation address on the issue of the mounting inflation, because very soon, if the prices stay at this point, the government will have to raise the oil prices, the gas prices can go up, it can play havoc with the public opinion of the government at a time when the opposition parties were continuously talking in order to bring a no confidence vote either against the Prime Minister or Chief Minister Punjab or against the Speaker of the National Assembly. So the situation will play in the hands of the opposition parties in Pakistan.
Thank you so much. Inshallah, we will continue on the discussions on this ever-evolving topic right now.